States of America and to the which it stands, one nation, under God, justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Von Hartung, Chair via Zoom.
Here.
Vice Chair Alexis Hill via Zoom.
Here.
Bob Lucy via Zoom. He appears to be absent. Kitty Jung via Zoom.
Present.
And Jean Herman in chambers.
Here.
County Manager Eric Brown.
Here.
Assistant DA Nathan Edwards.
Present.
And I'm Jan Galasini, your county clerk. Sir, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Manager, would you take us into item number 3?
Item 3 is the Commissioner and County Manager's announcements, reports, and updates to include boards and commissions updates, requests for information, or topics for future agendas.
Do you have any such items, Mr. Manager?
I have none, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, anything from anyone?
No,
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hearing none, I will close item number 3. That takes us to item number 4. Mr. Manager, would you take us into that item?
Item 4 is pursuant to NAC 293.365 and NRS Chapter 293, Declaration of Canvass of Vote, Recount of Republican Gubernatorial Primary. If approved, direct staff to submit the results to the Secretary of State's office and execute order of the recount.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Ms. Rodriguez, welcome. So, Ms. Rodriguez, will you take us through the process, and then will you also explain how we came up with the estimated cost and the refund that will be issued and how that process will occur?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Jamie Rodriguez for the record. So a highlight of the recount, we received the request for the recount on June 28th. It is a statewide recount for the gubernatorial race, which requires 100% of the ballots to be recounted. We estimated the cost for that recount to be $84,751. That deposit was then sent to the Secretary of State's office, again, as it's statewide and it's coordinated by them. That figure came from our ability for what we can charge for the recount. Full-time county employees, we cannot charge for our regular hours, so our 8-hour shifts cannot be charged towards the recount. However, overtime can, as well as costs related to temporary employees that we have to bring on to complete this task, the certification board that we have to recertify the recount, and then we had vendor support on site in case we ran into issues. The law allows for 5 days to complete the recount. We based our figure on allowing for that full 5 days. Just as a precaution. And so that figure does not account for the 8 hours of staff for Thursday and Friday. However, since we started on Thursday, if we would have done 5 days, it would have then run into Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, which was a holiday, which then attributes to the large cost that it would have been for us to, if it had taken the full 5 days. We did that as a precaution to ensure that we had the appropriate amount of time to actually complete the recount. Because it was a statewide recount, there was collaboration amongst the 17 counties for when it would begin. The agreement was made that we began the recount on Thursday, June 30th. The recount in Washoe County began at 8 a.m. on Thursday. Our schedule for the recount was 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. Thursday through Monday to be able to go through all of the ballots. So in going through the ballots, a recount really has 3 primary steps. The first is for all duplicated ballots, those have to be pulled out, and a new duplication board, which is 2 teams of 2 people who are bipartisan teams who go through and will review the original ballot and the duplicated ballot to ensure before the recount that those duplicated ballots were duplicated appropriately. We also do rescan through the tabulator every mail ballot. Those are rescanned through the tabulators because the law requires that a recount of ballots must be done in the same manner for which they were originally counted. So there were some requests for a hand count. By law, we could not do that because we did not do a hand count for the election itself. The third step is the upload of all ICX Prime USB sticks for the election. I would like to give a large shout out to the temps who came back after the election to help us finish the recount. And we finished well ahead of schedule. We were thinking it would likely take us Saturday, possibly into Sunday. We actually finished Friday, July 1st, shortly after 4 p.m. With the completion of the recount, the change of votes cast for each candidate was a total of 2 additional votes for candidate Joey Gilbert. There was no change to the votes received by candidate Joe Lombardo, and therefore candidate Joe Lombardo retains the win for the Republican gubernatorial race in Washoe County. Accounting for those 2 votes, the vote totals were the same for the recount as well as the original election. And so we believe confidently that the 2 additional votes were based on the adjudication process. Adjudication is if you make multiple marks in any one race, then the machine's not able to read that as a 1 vote counted or 1 vote cast, for one candidate. You have a bipartisan team that then goes through those ballots, reviews them to determine the intent of the voter, ensuring that they properly crossed out the name of the person they did not want to vote for, and cast the vote for the person they did want to, or that they filled in the circle enough to actually be able to be cast as a vote. And so that's where we believe the 2 additional votes for Joey Gilbert came from. The final cost for the recount, because we were able to finish significantly earlier than we had anticipated, came out to $9,082.17. For the cost of the recount, the requirement is for us to give an estimate of costs. Again, because it was statewide, the deposit for that cost was received by the Secretary of State's office. The final cost has been sent to the Secretary of State's office. Those funds will then come to us through the Secretary of State's office, and the difference will go back to the candidate to pay for the cost, refund them the additional amount that was not needed to cover the recount. So again, very quickly for the election summary report, you'll see if you look at the report that we've submitted to you for the recount against the original, all of the numbers do add up the same, nonpartisan votes, Democratic votes, Republican votes, and total votes. Again, the only difference is that in the original election, we showed Joey Gilbert as receiving 14,743 votes. In the recount, we show him as having received 14,745 votes. Joe Lombardo, who was the winner of that election in Washoe County, received 15,051 votes. So again, the outcome of the election did not change through the recount, and I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Rodriguez?
No questions from me, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Jung or Commissioner Herman?
No, thank you.
No, thanks.
Okay. All right. Madam Clerk, thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Madam Clerk, would you open public comment at this time?
Mr. Manager, would you like to read?
Mr. Chair, I'll read the item, number 5.
No, this is not general public comment. This is
I'm
public
sorry.
comment
You're
for
correct.
item number 4.
You're correct. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
First up, we have Dahlia Gibson.
Hello, my name is Dahlia Gibson. I'm a lifelong Washoe County resident and Director of Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood Marmonte. I came to this meeting to let the Commission know how thankful I am with the job the Registrar's Office has done and continues to do, both for regular elections and for the recount. I was able to spend time during early voting at the Washoe County Public Library in downtown Reno to observe that polling location. The people overseeing the location were friendly and thanked me for coming to observe the process. The people staffing the sign-in greeted everyone who came up to vote in person. They made sure everyone had any questions answered and understood the process. And the same can be said for the man who was staffing the ballot drop-off station. Everyone was wonderful, and I left my observation shift confident that our election was in skilled hands and continue to be validated on that. The recount reflected the trust was well placed. So I just wanted to commend the work that the Elections Department has done and continues to do. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next up, we have Donald Fossum.
May I have the overhead, please?
Welcome.
Thank you. All right, you'll remember that one from the last time I was here, and I'm using it again today because I've made some notes on there. One of them is it took 6 weeks for you to rig the deck for the recount, which you were able to do in 2 days because you used all the same numbers, all the same ballots, all the same methods to do it. I am proposing that 6 weeks gave you time to streamline for the rigging, which makes this canvas a farce. There's my new one, Stop the Canvas. You charge $200,000 nearly, okay, that's a round figure if you'll excuse me, to look into the election, the primary election of 2022. There's something called election integrity that goes beyond the ballot counting. Election integrity is not present when you have an election where you're watching the vote count go through the night or over a matter of time, and it stops. Where's the accounting for that in this canvas? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
That's everybody that has signed in chambers. Is there anybody else wishing to speak that is in chambers? I see nobody. I do have 2 emails to place on file, one from Robert Abbott and one from Christina Sherbrock. And Mr. Chairman, that is all of the public comment.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Commissioners, I'm going to allow the DA some time here to give us some parameters. Mr. Edwards, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you're aware, the purpose of the meeting this morning is to conduct a canvass of the recount of the votes cast in the primary for the gubernatorial election in the Republican primary 2022. The recount was demanded pursuant to NRS 293.403, pursuant to the statutes relating to that provision. There are 5 days to begin the recount after the demand and payment are made. Those things occurred. There are then 5 days to complete the recount, which was done. Then pursuant to Secretary of State regulations, NAC 293.365, there are 5 working days after the completion of the canvass in which the Board of County Commissioners must complete its canvass of the votes, which is what you're doing here this morning. You have to have a report prepared and submit it off to the Secretary of State's office that certifies the outcome based on the recount. That is what's been presented for you this morning by county staff. Like the original canvass that was done after the primary election, this is a duty of statute and administrative code. And the administrative code regulations here are the Secretary of State's regulations that the Secretary of State, as the chief elections officer of the state pursuant to statutory law in Nevada, is empowered to enact to carry out Chapter 293 and the related chapters on elections in Nevada. The results of the recount, once you have certified them in this canvas, then are forwarded on to the Secretary of State. Any candidate who disputes the outcome of the election from that point is able to do an election contest in court if that's what they wish to do. That is up to the individual candidates and their campaigns. That's not a decision that this board has to get involved in or make. And that is the outline of what you're doing here this morning, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Did I miss it? Tell me about the NRS requirements for the recount to occur in the same manner that it was done initially or originally.
Yes, and Mrs. Rodriguez hit on that during her presentation, and she's 100% correct. Pursuant to Chapter 293 of the Nevada Revised Statutes, the recount is required to be conducted in the same manner that the count occurred for the original primary election in this matter. It has to be tabulated in the same way. There has to be a recount board that's put together, and they have to follow the same methods that were used to conduct the original count. You are correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Commissioners, any questions for the DA?
I don't have any questions, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to make a motion.
Okay. Let me get through Commissioner Jung or Commissioner Herman. Any questions for the DA or for staff for that matter?
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Vice Chair Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to approve the recount of the Republican governor primary in order for the 2022 Republican governor primary.
Okay. Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion by Commissioner Hill, or Vice Chair Hill, second by Commissioner Jung. We have taken public comment on this item. We've heard from staff and the DA.
Mr. Chair, one more thing. This is Mr. Edwards again. I have, yes. Does that motion, Commissioner Hill, does that motion include direction to staff to forward on to the Secretary of State?
Yes, it does. I was just reading what was in the staff report, but if you would like me to add that, I'm absolutely happy to do that.
I think by answering affirmatively that you've clarified that it is included.
Seconder agrees?
Yes, she does. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, we have a motion and a second. We have taken public comment, heard from the DA. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay?
Okay, motion carries 3-1 with Commissioner Herman being in the negative. Motion carries. So thank you so much. Madam Clerk, that takes us now to item number 5, public comment, general public comment. Or Mr. Manager, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Public comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the commission agenda. The commission will also hear public comment during individual action items with comment limited to 3 minutes per person. Comments are to be made to the commission as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Madam Clerk, would you please call general public comment?
Mr. Chairman, I have nobody signed in.
Okay, I will close public comment, bring it back to the board. Item number 6, Mr. Manager, would you take us into that?
Item 6 is commissioners and county managers' announcements, reports, and updates to include boards and commissions updates, requests for information, or topics for future agendas.
Again, Mr. Manager, do you have any such items?
I do not, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. Commissioners, anything on this final commissioners' announcements?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
No.
thank you so much. I will bring it back to us, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Madam Clerk, Mr. Manager. Thank you to the public commenters. We are adjourned.